Sometimes, the most powerful force in the world isn't in hospitals nor in vaults full of money, but in the hands of a mother who refuses to give up. This is the story of Grace Miller, a simple housekeeper who carried inside her a love so immense it transformed the life of a boy marked by loss and restored hope to a father who no longer believed in miracles. Get ready, because what you're about to hear is proof that a brave mother can change entire destinies. Before we begin the story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're a new channel bringing original content to YouTube, powerful stories about brave mothers. Only with your support can we grow, and we want to count on you. Thank you so much, and let's dive headfirst into this incredible story, full of unexpected twists and turns. At daybreak, before even starting her chores, Grace quietly went up to Matt's room. The door was ajar. He was awake, lying on his side in bed, eyes lost on the ceiling. She knocked softly. "Hi, may I come in?" she said gently. The boy slowly turned his face. There was surprise, then distrust, and finally, something Grace recognized immediately: loneliness. "You're the cleaning lady, Grace, right?" he said in a hoarse voice. "That's right, Grace, but I'm also a mother, and I thought maybe I could stay here with you for a bit." Matt didn't answer, but he didn't say no either. She came in, sat in the armchair by the bed, and kept quiet, respecting his pace. "You miss your mother a lot, don't you?" she whispered after a few minutes. He nodded, eyes brimming. "I think it was my fault. She died because of me." Grace felt her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. "Why do you think that, sweetheart? We were coming back from school. If I hadn't gone to class, she wouldn't have taken the car." Grace moved closer, calm. She knelt by the bed without invading his space. "Matt, look at me." He hesitated but turned his face. "No child is to blame for that. What happened was a terrible accident. But if you didn't exist, she would never have loved someone that much. You were the best part of her life." He swallowed hard. "Do you think she loved me even at the end?" "I'm certain. And wherever she is now, she wants only one thing: to see you happy." A tear slid down the boy's face. For the first time, he didn't look away. "Grace, do you think I'll ever walk again?" She caught her breath. She didn't want to lie, but she couldn't snuff out hope. "Can I run a test with you?" "A very simple one." "Okay." She placed her hand over his feet, on top of the blanket. "Can you feel this here?" "Yes. And now?" "Also." She smiled. "Feeling is the first step. That's already something. We'll go from here." Outside the bedroom, Richard Anderson called Grace to talk in the hallway. "Grace?" "Yes, sir?" He seemed tense. He crossed his arms, avoiding her eyes. "I understand you mean well, but I need to ask you not to talk about Matthew's mother with him anymore." Grace took a deep breath, trying to stay serene. "Forgive me, sir, but he needs to talk about her. Swallowing that pain only makes it worse." Richard sighed. "Since Patricia died, he stopped walking. The doctors say it was an emotional block. Trauma. He saw everything happen. I tried. I really tried, but he won't let me get close." Grace felt a pang in her chest. In that man's eyes, she saw unresolved pain. He was hurt too, but unlike his son, he tried to hide it. "Mr. Anderson, and with all due respect, sometimes what a child needs isn't expensive treatment. It's someone who listens with their heart, who sees beyond the pain." He looked at her with heavy eyes. "Grace, I've tried everything, and Dr. Veronica is the only one who agreed to keep treating Matthew. I trust her." Grace bowed her head in respect, but deep down she felt something about that woman was wrong. "I understand, sir. I'm sorry if I crossed a line. That wasn't my intention. I appreciate your concern, but please keep your focus on your job." Grace nodded. She went back to the kitchen with her eyes full of tears. She knew she'd touched a sensitive point, but she also knew it wasn't a coincidence to have heard that scream the day before. God had placed that boy in her life for a reason, and she couldn't just ignore it. That night, after her shift, Grace went to the small room where she slept. She grabbed her phone and made a video call to her mother, Helen, who was taking care of her son, Tyler, in another city. The connection was bad, the image pixelated, but the boy's smile filled everything. "Mom, is everything okay there?" "It is, my love. And you? How was school today?" "I drew a picture of you cleaning a big house. Grandma said you got important now." Grace laughed. "More or less, you know. Everything is big here, but we're still small folks." I love you, Mom. I love you too, son, and I'm doing all this for you, okay? She hung up with a heart both broken and full. The longing was a constant wound. But there, in that strange house, she was beginning to feel like she had one more child to care for. The next morning, the house was quiet when Grace started her chores. As she walked down the second-floor hallway, she heard the wheelchair moving. It was Matthew, alone, going to the bedroom window. She approached carefully. "Good morning, Matt." He turned his face and gave a faint smile. "You came back." "Of course I came back. I promised I'd see you, remember? I thought you were going to leave like everyone else." Grace crouched down to be at his eye level. "You know it, I'm a mother. And when a mother cares, she doesn't just walk away like that." He stayed silent for a few seconds, then said, "Can I tell you a secret?" "You can." "I'm afraid to walk again. I'm afraid of falling. I'm afraid everything will go wrong and that it'll be my fault again." Grace felt like crying. "This is not your fault, Matt. None of it. And there's no rush. We'll go at your pace. Together." He nodded. For the first time, he seemed to truly trust someone. In the afternoon, when Dr. Veronica Spencer arrived for another session, Grace was cleaning the upstairs hallway where Matthew's room was. Even from a distance, she could hear everything. "Today we're doing the standing exercise, Matt," said the doctor, her voice harsh. "I can't. It hurts. You haven't even tried. Stop the drama and cooperate. No effort, no result." Grace squeezed the rag in her hand. She could feel anger boiling inside. "It hurts, please. Deal with it. If you don't cooperate, you'll never walk again." At that moment, she heard the chair being dragged roughly, the boy's cry, and a clatter. Maybe he'd hit something. Grace couldn't take it. She dropped the bucket, opened the door without knocking, and entered the room. "Doctor, excuse me, he's suffering." Veronica looked at her with contempt. "You again? I've already told you not to interfere with my work." "I'm not interfering, I'm protecting him. He's just a boy." "Grace, leave now, or I'll talk to Mr. Anderson and you'll lose your job." Before Grace could answer, Matthew spoke in a weak voice. "Grace, stay, please." Veronica rolled her eyes. "He doesn't need cheap affection. He needs results. And that's what I'm paid a fortune for." Grace answered firmly. "And what have you delivered so far? He still can't take a step." After a year and a half, the silence that followed was dense. Veronica flushed. "You're just a housemaid. What do you know about physiology?" "I don't. But I know about pain and about love too. Something that seems to be lacking around here." Matthew looked at Grace as if she were his only anchor. The doctor left the room furious. "I'll talk to Mr. Anderson. He'll put an end to this nonsense." When Richard came up to the room minutes later, he found Matthew calmer than ever, with Grace holding his hand. "What's going on here?" Veronica, outside, exploded. "The employee is disrupting treatment again. You need to decide on Richard, either her or me." He looked at his son. For the first time in a long while, the boy looked at peace. "Matt, what do you think?" The boy answered, voice steady. "Grace understands me, Dad. She treats me like a person, not a project." Richard didn't know what to say. Veronica huffed. "I can't work like this. Either that woman leaves or I do." Grace lowered her head. "If it's better for him, I'll quit. But first, let me ask just one question." Richard nodded. "Have you seen your son smile since the doctor started the treatment?" Silence was the answer. Grace went back to her room, packed her bag, and said goodbye to Maggie, the other employee. She cried quietly. But her conscience was clear. She did what a mother would do. As she walked out the mansion door, she heard from afar Matthew's voice from the second-floor window. "Grace, come back. Don't go." She didn't answer, but deep in her chest, she felt that this story that was far from over. Grace left the mansion late that afternoon with her chest ablaze. Each step toward the gate echoed a dilemma burning inside. Had she done the right thing? Or had she been just another poor woman dismissed for daring to feel too much? The cold wind in that region cut her face, but what truly hurt was imagining little Matthew alone again, left to that woman they called a doctor, who seemed to have forgotten the basics of humanity, listening with the heart. She reached the bus stop and sat on a metal bench, hugging her bag as if it were a shield. She tried calling her mother, but the signal was bad. She looked at the sky and thought of Tyler, her son. Would he understand someday what his mother had to do to keep him safe? Would he see that act as proof of strength, or just one more unjustifiable absence? Meanwhile, Inside the mansion, Richard paced back and forth in the living room, bothered by the house's silence. Veronica had already left, furious as expected, leaving behind her usual coldness and a pile of clinical arguments. But what rang in Richard's ears weren't her technical justifications. It was his son's sentence, said a few hours earlier. "She understands me, Dad. She treats me like a person." That stuck in his mind like a nail in wood. For the first time in a long time, Richard felt he was losing something no money could buy. It wasn't just an employee who had left. It was the only person Matthew had allowed near him in over a year, the only genuine human bond since the tragedy, and he had let it slip through his fingers, like someone who closes their eyes at the wrong moment. In the upstairs bedroom, Matthew stared at the window with wet eyes. The sky was beginning to darken, and he knew Grace wouldn't come back. He had heard the argument. He knew what it meant when adults started talking too softly. She was gone, and with her, the little bit of peace he'd begun to feel. The house felt emptier than ever. Food lost its taste. The sessions with the new physical therapist sent by the agency became mechanical and distant. She said pretty words, but her eyes had no warmth. Matthew said nothing. He returned to his previous silence, not out of inability, but in protest. In the days that followed, Grace tried to find other jobs without success. The domestic services agency informed her she'd been flagged as undisciplined, a fancy way of saying that telling the truth came at a price. With few options, she went back to working as a day cleaner, taking houses neighborhood by neighborhood, earning less than half of what she made at the mansion. Even so, she didn't complain. Integrity has a price, and she paid it with honor. But fate, as it always does with brave mothers, made sure to put her back on the path of battle. On a Wednesday afternoon, while she was cleaning the kitchen of an elderly lady downtown, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Hello, Grace? It's Maggie, and from Mr. Anderson's house." Her heart raced. "Hi, Maggie. Is everything okay?" "Not really." "Listen, I know you left, or rather, that they let you go, but I had to tell you something. Matt hasn't been eating properly for days. He stopped talking again. This morning, he fainted in the shower. Richard took him to the hospital." Grace covered her mouth, trying to contain the anguish. "Which hospital?" "Memorial Hills." I heard him say it on the phone. Without a second thought, Grace thanked her and ran to the bus stop. She took nothing but her phone and her courage. She knew she wouldn't be welcome, but she also knew mothers don't need an invitation to protect a child. When she arrived at the hospital, the glass building reflected the cloudy sky, as if it too carried the weight of the situation. Grace went in, asking at the front desk for the boy's name. The clerk hesitated, but Grace insisted with such maternal resolve that the employee simply handed her a card with the room number and said, "He's on the 8th floor." She took the elevator with her heart pounding. As she stepped out, she saw Richard with his back turned, looking out the corridor window. His tie was loose, eyes red, body hunched from exhaustion. When he turned and saw her, he froze. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see Matthew." "You don't work for me anymore." "I know, but I'm not here as an employee. I'm here as a mother, because I know he needs me." Richard hesitated. He wanted to say no, he wanted to keep control. But the truth is that for the first time, he didn't know what to do. And more than that, he didn't know what to say to convince himself that her presence there was bad. "He's unconscious," he murmured. "The doctor said his body is reacting to the lack of food and ongoing stress." Grace walked past him without asking permission. She entered the room and saw the boy lying there, hooked up to monitors, his skin pale and lips chapped. The same child who, days before, had started to smile again, now seemed to be fading little by little. She pulled up a chair and sat by the bed. She gently took his small hand. "Matthew, it's me, Grace. Remember me?" The boy didn't react, but gradually, his breathing seemed to steady. "I told you I wouldn't abandon you, and I keep my word, okay? You're not alone. You never were." She began to sing a soft song, the kind she used to hum to Tyler when he had a fever, a simple melody, but one that carried in every note the force of a limitless love. Richard stood at the door, eyes brimming, watching. That moment broke something inside him, maybe a useless pride, maybe the idea that control and money were enough, or maybe it was simply the understanding that true love, even when it comes from outside the family, can heal what medicine can't reach. Hours later, while Grace still kept vigil over the boy, a doctor entered the room. It was Dr. James Carter, a pediatric neurologist. "Are you a relative?" he asked. "No, but he considers me as such," Grace replied honestly. James smiled. "I've seen stronger bonds than blood between caregivers and children, and honestly, I've never seen a patient calm down like this." Your presence stabilized his heartbeat. Richard stepped closer. His voice choked. "Doctor, what if she stayed here as his companion? Just until he gets better." The doctor nodded. "If it's for his good, I'm in favor. And I think he is too." That night, Grace stayed by Matthew's side the whole time. She talked to him about stars, about old movies, about chocolate cakes, and about courage. She told stories about Tyler, described the sound of rain on her mother's porch, and promised that he would still step on grass with his own feet. In the middle of the night, a tear slid down Matthew's face. Slowly, his eyes opened. "Grace." She stood up, heart racing. "I'm here, sweetheart. Stay calm. You came back. I promised, didn't I?" He tried to smile. "Did my dad cry?" She laughed softly. "A little, but don't tell him I said that." Matthew turned his face and closed his eyes again, but this time, to rest, not to run from the world. The next morning, Richard brought coffee to Grace and sat beside her in the hallway. "I want to apologize." "You don't need to," she answered, tired but serene. "I do. I let the wrong person leave our lives, and now all I want is for you to stay." Grace looked at him, without arrogance, without fear, just with the sincerity of someone who always acted out of love. "I'll stay, but not as a maid. I'll stay as part of his life, as someone he chose to trust, and that no paycheck can buy." Richard nodded, moved. "Deal." And there, in that quiet hospital, far from Persian rugs, crystal glasses, and etiquette demands, a new configuration of family was born. Imperfect, unlikely, but real. Because sometimes all a broken heart needs to start healing is someone who treats it as if it were their own child. The days that followed in the hospital were marked by something medicine couldn't explain, but that Grace understood better than anyone. Love, consistency, and presence began to work better than any drug. Matthew no longer avoided his father's eyes, nor did he shy away when Grace talked about his mother. Little by little, the ghosts lost ground, giving way to a kind of hope that didn't shout, it simply remained. It was a quiet hope, the kind that is planted in silence and blooms when no one else believes. Richard started going to the hospital every day, not just as a worried father, but as a man in the process of rebuilding. He began to realize that, in all the pain he'd lived since the accident, maybe he had become invisible too. Someone who walked, worked, breathed, but no longer felt. Seeing Matthew open up again, not to him, but to Grace, hurt at first. But then it was freeing, because there was no competition there. Grace didn't push him away, quite the opposite. She pulled him back to where he should never have left, the center of his own son's heart. One morning, while they had coffee together at the hospital cafeteria, Richard looked at Grace differently, not with desire nor curiosity, but with respect. A respect that comes from finally understanding the worth of someone who was there all along, even without titles, lab coats, or a fancy last name. "I need to tell you something," he said, slowly stirring sugar into his coffee. "Go ahead." I thought about putting Matt in a clinic abroad. Switzerland, Canada, the best places. Advanced therapies, robotics, artificial intelligence. But now I'm seeing him with you. I understand that maybe what he always needed was much closer than I imagined. Grace smiled, her eyes steady. "You weren't wrong to try. It's just that sometimes the solution isn't in technology. It's in affection. You changed everything," he said sincerely. "And I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. Just be present from now on." He needs that very much. That same day, the neurologist, Dr. James Carter, brought news. The team had decided to test a new rehabilitation method with Matthew based on his positive emotional response. The idea was to use his bond with Grace as part of the motor stimulus process, something completely outside traditional protocols, but already being studied in cases of psychosomatic blocks. "Grace, are you willing to actively participate in the sessions?" the doctor asked. She didn't hesitate. "I'll do whatever it takes." In the first experimental session, Matthew was visibly nervous. They were in a therapy room at the hospital, decorated with soft colors, cushions, and playful tools. In the center, a padded mat and some support bars. "Today, we're not going to force you to do anything, Matt," the doctor said. "We just want to see how far you can go, all at your pace." Grace knelt in front of him. "You know what I think? That you already took the first step when you called me back. The rest is just a consequence." The boy took a deep breath. He looked at his own feet. His legs trembled, just imagining the effort. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of failure. Because now around him, there was a network, a base, an invisible embrace that held everything, even when nothing else seemed to work. He placed his hands on the sidebars, breathed again, and then, with great effort, did the impossible. He stood up. The nurses watching held their breath. Richard, on the other side of the room, couldn't hold back tears. Grace, she just stayed there, in silence, smiling, like someone who always knew this day would come. And Matthew, with shaky legs, took a step, just one. But it meant the whole world. Little by little, his recovery became news inside the hospital. The boy who walked again with love, some nurses said. Richard began bringing his work to the room, spending the days there, not just as a father, but as a learner, learning to listen, to hear without hurry, to touch with care and not control, discovering that fatherhood isn't physical presence, it's emotional presence. Grace, for her part, spent nights at the hospital even when her shift as companion was over. She never asked for a raise or a contract. What she did wasn't out of obligation. It was instinct, something only mothers have, a connection that goes beyond blood. A kind of love that sees in the other the continuation of one's own soul. A few weeks later, Matt was discharged, still with care, still in a wheelchair part of the time, but with a light heart and legs responding. At the hospital gate, journalists showed up, trying to pry out some touching story. Richard pushed them away. This wasn't a spectacle. It was a miracle. And miracles are lived with reverence. The return to the mansion was different. No pomp, no flowers, but there was warmth. The house, once cold, began to transform. Grace was given a larger room with a window facing the garden. She was officially hired as Matt's tutor and caregiver, but in practice, and she was already much more than that. She was family. Tyler was brought to live with her. Richard understood that keeping mother and son apart was unfair and, to everyone's surprise, prepared a room for the boy, as if he were also part of the house. And he was. The two boys became inseparable friends. They played video games, watched movies, and taught each other what no adult could. That healing often comes from love that can't be explained. And Grace, she, who had always been seen as the cleaning lady, was now called by Matt, his second mother. Not as a substitute for the one who was gone, but as someone who arrived to complete what had been left unfinished. Richard, bit by bit, began to look at Grace with eyes that went beyond gratitude, but she kept her feet on the ground. She knew there was still much to rebuild. She didn't want to confuse affection with debt, love with dependence. Everything has its time. One night, while the boys slept, the two of them were in the kitchen having tea, the house silent, their gazes calmer. "You know, Grace," Richard said, "I thought I was strong, but I realized I only understood strength when I saw you fighting for a son who wasn't yours." She smiled without looking away. "He is now." Richard nodded. "He is, yes, and I'm very grateful for that. Don't thank me. Just keep being the father he needs. That's more than I ever hoped for." A good silence settled between them, the kind that doesn't bother, that only exists when there's truth between two people. It wasn't romance yet, but it was the seed of something that can only grow between souls that recognize each other in pain, in care, and in self-giving. Months later, Matthew walked with support. He could already climb small steps. He returned to school with special accommodations, and on the day of the end-of-year presentation, in front of dozens of parents and students, he walked onto the stage, took a deep breath, and gave a short speech. Many people told me I wouldn't make it, that it was better to accept and move on in a different way. But one person believed in me when I didn't believe in myself anymore. She wasn't my family, nor a doctor, nor a teacher. She was someone who just wanted to see me well and who treated me like a son. So today, I want to thank my second mother, Grace Miller. The audience stood, applauding. Grace cried quietly, seated beside Tyler, and Richard, there by her side, eyes brimming, only whispered, "You changed everything." She smiled. "I didn't change anything. I just loved him the way I'd want my son to be loved if I weren't around. In that moment, there was no difference of class, origin, or status. There was only one certainty: that woman, invisible to the world, had become the light of an entire house, the healing of a boy, and the redemption of a father. Because in the end, it doesn't matter where you live, how much you earn, or the title on your badge. What transforms lives is what you do when no one's watching. And that, a brave mother like Grace Miller has always known how to do like no one else. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to walk with us here on the channel. Every subscription is like a hug that strengthens this community of people who believe in the power of love and the courage of brave mothers. Leave your like, share this video with someone who needs to be moved today, and stay with us to live more stories that remind the world that nothing is stronger than a mother's heart.